Control and management of the Kansas City park systems, which I think is up to 64 parks right now and probably just below about 750 acres of parks land. The effect of this ordinance would be to eliminate the Parks Commission as a separate legal entity. What would happen as a practical effect if council were to pass this legislation, the day-to-day operation and management would then, by just default, it'd be by legal reality or legal effect. You eliminate the Parks Commission, you have a city function that then, by default, falls under the statutory responsibility of whoever the service director is, under the direction of the mayor. And so, the likely practical real-world end result would be that the Parks Department and its personnel would be absorbed into what I'll call the Department of Public Works. And theoretically, under this budget plan, long-term, or the way it would pan out, would be that ultimately you'd have cost savings. The mayor's estimated to be approximately $100,000.
Okay, first I have a couple of things, especially as a former park commissioner. The objective is to gain control of the parks. You said you're going to put it into a separate department within the Public Works, correct?
Well, it'd be a division of the Department of Public
So
Works.
I understood that correctly. In order to save $100,000 in a department that currently is operating at $153,000 less in 2012 than they were in 2011, through the loss of 3 key personnel, being an assistant director, administrative assistant, and a garden center manager. So with those hits that this department has taken, and I've always been a big advocate of having a Parks and Recreation director, because I really don't like autonomous boards that don't answer to taxpayers. My big concern is actually sitting on this commission. There's a lot of responsibility that goes with that. And with taking control of this and merging it into another department, you're going to have to give me some answers to questions such as who's going to maintain the park funds, the shelter rentals, the hall rentals, who's actually going to control these funds. Then you've got the responsibilities of scheduling events, contacting the park police, which according to the ordinance we're doing away with that, but when I was on the Park Commission, we sat down and gave that back and negotiated with the Chief McKim at the time that Captain Kaczynski was going to provide officers in the parks. So the Park Commission already made a move to do away with that, but I think that there's so many responsibilities that this department maintains. How are we not going to lose the identity of our Canton parks by all of a sudden, at the snap of a finger, shifting everybody over into another department?
Well, in terms of the actual calculation, the cost savings, the mayor wants to handle that because that was his calculation. In terms of how it would actually, I'm just telling you how it operates, or how I guess we'd have to operate it. I mean, you're right. It is with 64 parks currently operating and nearly 750 acres to maintain. That's a big job. The current staffing in the Parks Department with the elimination of these various personnel, that's not sustainable if left as it is now, I don't think. You don't have enough people to do all the scheduling, okay. And the shelters, I mean, with 64 parks, I mean, they don't all have shelters, but there's plenty of usage out of them. You're right, the funds have to be deposited, that's complex. Within the street department, between street department and the service center over there are 4 admins at that facility. In terms of the actual dollar amount put on this savings, I can tell you that if it's under the Department of Public Service, it's either going to be a division head sort of title, or it would be an assistant director's position whose sole job would be parks. I don't know how else you could do it. You'd have to have some individual who is responsible for nothing but parks. There's certainly that much work.
But we will have to bring in somebody to oversee this division of the Public Works, which therefore our savings is out the window. And, I mean, we have to fill these positions back. We have the garden center that's completely unattended right now. Those women down there do wonderful things, but there still has to be somebody to go down there and open the place up. And I don't mean to be difficult, but that's a lot of responsibility that we're going to shift over to one department. And, you know, with control comes responsibility, and if we can't handle the responsibility, our parks are going to suffer. And they're already suffering because we're down key personnel.
Well, there's another reason the parks are suffering, and I think that this is something the council should consider as well, regardless of what you decide to do substantively. While our responsibility, yes, for the Department of Public Service would increase, our responsibility, or the Parks Department's responsibilities, have been increasing steadily over the decades. Meanwhile, our population is decreasing. And so while we have less population, less money, less resources, we continue to add parkland and parks. When I started with the city, we had 62. Today we have 64. You need to find, I think, I mean, it's just me talking, but as an entity, as a city, we really need, whether it's through the Parks Commission or through the Department of Public Service or through City Council, we really need to start taking a look at what we have, what we're able to maintain with the resources that we have, and take a close look at those 750 acres, those 64 parks, and focus in on how we're going to maintain them. Are we going to, do we use the Victorian garden approach and maintain them, formally, or are we able to open up, as we've done with Fairhope or Mallon Park or many of the new parks? Are we able to take some of the watersheds that we have within those parks and use natural foliage and make those passive recreation areas versus, the more traditional concept of, always putting in a playground and a shelter, those sorts of things? And
kind of a two-part question. First of all, the autonomous board was put together by the electors in 1920. I have a hard time resolving something that the general populace said was right for this city. And I don't even know, Mr. Martuscio can tell me if we legally can do that or not, because I don't know that answer.
Mr. Chairman? Member Sorelli, I share your same concern. I have always believed that things that are constructed should be deconstructed in the way they've been constructed. However, legally speaking, the state of law in Ohio, through the Ohio Supreme Court, is that in this case, that particular commission can be dissolved by a councilmanic ordinance, even though it was put to a vote of the electorate.
Thank you. Second part. Excuse me. While we were looking at this alternative positioning, why did they not look into the fact of enjoining, as you said other communities have, the recreation department with the park department? That seems like a perfect fit. And there's a levy. I know you can't, but why not? I mean, and how did they do it in other communities but not here?
I think I can see the mayor would like to respond.
I'd like to take this one here. Thank you for asking that, and I'll kind of respond to both these questions. Yes. Thank you. First of all, I just want to remind this council that the reason that this came about is because we're trying to figure out how to close a $3.7 million shortfall that's anticipated for January. So we're talking about things that have to generate revenue or cut costs, and that's how this came about, as opposed to raising taxes or layoffs. So these are considerations that we're making that are in lieu of those other alternatives. In reference to the park board, we would like very much, in our direction, and the reason that we're doing this in reference to right now is because our goal is to merge Parks and Recreation. We cannot do that under the current structure because the park board is a separate entity, as is the recreation board. If we disband the park board now, we could absorb it into the public works and use that to help us save costs in the short term. Then we can come back next year, and if many of you know this, the recreation department has a study right now and talk about how to merge Parks and Recreation. And if we have this parks board that is not part of a separate board now, by the vote of the people, it's now undone, then we can go back to the people next year or whenever the boards and everybody works out their details and go to the public and ask them to create the Parks and Recreation department. And because it's just a division of the city government, we can then have them absorb that and make that transfer. So this would be step one in the path to a Parks and Recreation board. and we cannot go forward on Parks and Recreation until we undo this. So step one, let's undo it. We can save some money in the process. We can get some direct oversight on it between council and the administration. I have full faith in my service director as well as our public works director that they can handle this, and we'll make sure that there's an assigned person in charge of parks while this transition is happening. But that will also put us in a position that we can then move forward on Parks and Recreation, which I think we all want. And let me remind you that this Park Board was created over 100 years ago by a vote of the people before Parks and Recreations existed. And shortly after that, that system came about in nearly every other community in the state of Ohio, with the exception, I think, 3, us one of those 3, has a separate park board. Everybody else has a Parks and Recreation combo type system. So we are the rare entity that did it before the new structure came about 100 years ago. And so what we're trying to do is to undo what we did 100 years ago, allow us to restructure and come back and create a format that makes sense. And in the meantime, we can save a little money in the process, which, by the way, we have to do because we've got less than 5 months to figure out where those savings are coming from. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Regarding it seems to me that administration thinks the only thing the maintenance people do is mow lawns and pick up the trash. Otherwise, you understand the maintenance group would be unable to take on other duties and do a good job. A real concern of mine that if we have a shortage of manpower, that the trash will be picked up the next day, or we sanitize the restroom the next day. The next day never comes. Also, that the barrels will be overloaded, and these barrels are larger than our regular sanitation people pick up anyway. And I can see an increase in hernias, in back problems, in lost time accidents, and I think we're going to eat up that $100,000 savings you're thinking of through the lost time accident act. Also, right now we have a request of the neighborhood group that would like to use Maryland Park as a park block party, and unfortunately it's been vandalized. I went to Doug Perry and I told him the situation. He went to maintenance, and maintenance says the party's going to be in September and it could be repaired with plastic between now and then. And I can see this going onto the back burner if this would happen. I just can't see. I think we're defeating our purpose if we go along with this.
I think I'm going to concur with Mr. Griffith, Mr. Morris on this. 92 years ago, the voters put this together. They have not seen fit in 92 years to disband it. If we want to combine Parks and Rec, we've just been told it has to go to the voters. I suggest that we let the voters make the entire decision of disbanding this board and merging it with another board. That is truly the way of our country and the way that government should be. It's that important. It should be a decision made by the voters. If they're the ones who are going to merge them, they should be the ones that disband them. They created them. If you're going to allow council to begin overriding votes of what the electorate wants, I've got a whole lot of things I'd like to do. So,
but what is the time frame that could be done, and then what are some of the obstacles that might happen to keep that from that combination from happening?
Time-wise, what obstacles? Well, you've got, I guess we'd have to talk to the law department. The recreation board is a separate entity. I don't know what legal procedure you'd have to go through to undo that or merge the two entities. Do you, Joe?
Mr. Chairman, this is something that would have to be done through the General Assembly. Both the current Park Commission and the current Park and Recs Board exist under Chapter 755 of the Ohio Revised Code. It prescribes how they exist, how they are chosen, how they're constituted. The Rec Board itself is a combination of city appointees and Canton City School Board appointees. It's a hybrid. It's not city. It's city and school board. It's its own entity with its own funding stream. The current Park Commission has no funding stream of its own. It's funded through the general funds through City Council. If I have a moment, I'd like to also address another question that was raised. This ordinance before you also has in it a section that says, if this ordinance passes, more legislation will have to be brought to you that will be worked on in conjunction with the auditor, the law department, human resources, and civil service to work out the issues of what happens to the employees. Classified civil servants have due process rights. They can't be terminated unless certain statutory criteria are met in terms of lack of work, lack of funding, and so on. Unions have bidding rights. So this ordinance, if it's passed, will lead to others, just so you know, and that's in the ordinance before you. And we haven't, this is unprecedented. There will be things you'll be asking us to look at if this ordinance is passed that haven't been researched or done yet.
The next step for the administration then would be to sit down with the unions to make sure that we can work out, where it goes, how it works, or whether it be separate or joint, whatever, because there's concern from the workers that say, if we get merged into one, where does that do with our seniority if we keep separate departments? And we would work with them and try to make sure that we would go in the direction that work best for the workers, so we don't have an uprising in their issues, because like Lauren said, they're still going to be doing the same jobs in the same departments, and so we'll take care of that. But we can't take that step until this step happens, and then there'll be a domino effect of making the next steps come forward. But this starts the ball rolling, allowing us to go ahead and change things, and it is unprecedented, and you know what? These are unprecedented times, and that's why we're making these proposals, because we have got to change the way we do business.
But I think the point is well made. This has to be engineered. I mean, in other words, if you take a Reese's cup and chocolate and peanut butter go well together, but to actually make it work, somebody had to engineer a way to get the peanut butter into the chocolate rather than just trying to take a jar of peanut butter and a candy bar and smash them together, okay? Because what would happen is, it's by analogy, okay? If you try to, all right, you didn't like the analogy, I'll try better. No, but if you take in other words, if you take the parks personnel and you just try to squish them together with the street department, there's seniority issues. Your positions may not align with ours. This would be an evolution. And it would have to be engineered. You're not just going to be able to throw all those personnel in one basket, and you'd have serious seniority and operational issues. So again, as a division of the public works, I think you could get beyond most of them.
And show me where the $100,000 is. Show me the savings. In black and white on paper. These are important things that we need to look at and see. And it gives us information is wonderful to have. Good information makes good decisions.
Councilperson Fisher?
Just one last thing. With hearing these other things coming up, additional ordinances coming down, and obviously the civil service rates coming down, it does beg the question if we're going to do this as a budget piece, this is coming down as part of the mayor's alternative budget plan, is can we move forward with the assumption that we can save $100,000 with this by next year, because this is next year's budget that we're talking about. So I don't know if you want to address that, or if that's not something that we know the answer to or not. But just since we're in the finance committee and not necessarily the parks committee about how we're going to run it, can we really budget on that if we have all these unknowns down the road?
Thank you. And as we discussed in our finance meetings a year ago, and as we looked at these ideas, we spent a lot of time trying to pencil paper the dollar savings or increased revenues that will be generated by these proposals. And I can say with total confidence that these 5 ordinances, or the 3 that are today and the 2 that are coming, or more that are tied to these 5 issues, if those things go through along with the other things the administration has the ability to do, I have full confidence that we'll be able to meet our budget come January 1st. If we don't do these things, then we're going to have to come up with alternative ideas or just start the layoffs, because we have this shortfall ahead of us that we have to reduce. Again, these were the ideas. We discussed all these items with every one of you as we went through the list of possibilities, and this is what we're narrowed down to. So if council chooses not to do this or other items on the list, we either need to come up with an alternative for savings, or we have to be prepared for the cuts that will be pending.